Alright, we need another Patreon request for the day. Which one are we gonna do? That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, I love what you are thinking. You have no idea what I'm thinking. Yes, I do. And it's wonderfully twisted. So Mr. Brooks tells a story of a respected businessman who hides a murderous alter ego. What's up, guys, and welcome back to another patron-sponsored review. This one is sponsored by and brought to you by Delvante Hunt. If you guys are curious what Patreon is, how you can help this channel, or how you can get cool exclusive privileges like the one that Delvante is exercising right now with this review request, you can check those out down below in the video description with all of my social media links and my Patreon link, which will take you directly to my Patreon page, show you all the multiple tiers, all the different perks for all the different versions of support that you give this channel, and it is in fact the best way that you can support and help this channel grow. So check that out if you would please, and now, Mr. Brooks. So one of the biggest questions that people will ask movie fans is what movie deserved a sequel that never got one? And previous to 3-4 years ago, a lot of people would have said Unbreakable. Thank God that got rectified. People would still say Dread. Maybe one day we'll see another one of those. There is always those movies that feel like they had so much more potential to deliver a couple more films or a full-on franchise or at least one great sequel that for either financial reasons or studio reasons never got the chance to have that. And in my opinion, Mr. Brooks is absolutely one of those movies. This movie came out in 2007, kind of quietly released and quietly left theaters. It's one of the more unspoken about movies of that era. I don't know if maybe Dexter coming out around the same time kind of overshadowed this a bit, being that they have somewhat similar premises. I'm honestly not sure, but Mr. Brooks was planned to be a trilogy of films. This movie is a self-contained story, but there are certain plot threads that get left out. And as somebody that has always absolutely loved this movie, goddamn, I want that sequel.
Hello.
But why do I want that sequel so bad? What is so great about this little film called Mr. Brooks? I'm about to tell you. The positives for Mr. Brooks, first and foremost, the thing that really stood out to me upon this most recent rewatch, and I've watched this movie plenty of times, is that this is one of those few films that has a collection of plots going on. There's at least 6 or 7 plots going on, all kind of interwoven with each other throughout the runtime of this film. And in my opinion, Mr. Brooks does a damn good job at not only balancing all of them, but resolving pretty much all of them and intertwining all of them in a way that makes sense and doesn't get convoluted. You got Mr. Brooks and his internal struggle with his alter ego Marshall, who's kind of the whisper in his ear telling him to go kill people. Then you got the introduction of Dane Cook's character of Mr. Smith, who has witnessed his latest murder and is using it to blackmail Mr. Brooks to take him along with him because he suddenly feels that he has the urge to kill. Then you have the whole subplot with Mr. Brooks' daughter who comes back from college that might have a very dark secret that he's got to figure out what the hell that is that's going on. You enter Demi Moore in here, who's kind of like the main FBI investigator or the main detective that's coming in to try to solve this murderous case. The serial killer that Mr. Brooks is, the thumbprint killer. She's the one who's always had the taste for blood, if you will, to try to take this guy down. Then you have her whole subplot going on beyond the Mr. Brooks storyline, where she's got this other serial killer that she put away that just escaped from prison that's trying to kill her. She's got this divorce going on with her husband. You could rack your damn mind, and I'm probably already confusing the shit out of everybody that's never seen this movie that's going, Jesus, that sounds like an entire season worth of television. And you're telling me this is resolved well in one movie? Yeah, I think it is. Not only do each of them get their appropriate amount of screen time to where some of the lesser subplots don't start to overtake the more interesting subplots, and they all do a pretty good job at keeping them pretty well interesting, but they're also resolved in a nice way to where Mr. Brooks gets kind of intertwined into every single one of these, not only the ones that he's directly involved with, but the ones like with Demi Moore's character where he kind of discovers. He gets intertwined into all of them and makes moves to resolve all of them in this big end game in the third act of the film that I think resolves itself pretty brilliantly.
No visible signs of forced entry. We even had to cut the security chains to get in.
If I didn't know better, I'd say these people were killed by a ghost.
Moving on from that, basically all the performances in this movie, including Dane Cook, shockingly, is really good. I mean, you got Kevin Costner, you got William Hurt, who's playing the two different sides of the coin of this character, Mr. Brooks. Kevin Costner playing, obviously, the physical embodiment of the character, and he's kind of more so in this, the straight-laced side of the personality. He's the one that wants to do good. He's the one that wants to stop killing, wants to be there for his family. And then you have Marshall, played by William Hurt, who is the evil personality that's saying, fuck all that, this shit is fun, let's go kill some bitches. And the way that they kind of interact with each other is some of the most intriguing parts of the film, to where you have a scene where Mr. Brooks is with somebody, and then William Hurt just kind of shows up, and they have their own little side dialogue while this person's just doing their own thing, and not necessarily looking at Mr. Brooks like, who the fuck are you talking to, but just, he's doing it inside of his head, but they display it in a way that makes it very cool, and those two actors interacting is just very awesome. And the way that it kind of embodies what this character Mr. Brooks has in his head going on all of the time.
I love what you were thinking.
Then you get to Dane Cook's character, and look, Dane Cook, I understand why some people don't get his humor. I always thought he was very funny. Humor subjective. But I feel like this dude was just kind of unfairly hated whenever he was kind of on top in the stand-up world, and he started to get a few movies. I think Good Luck Chuck's very good. I think My Best Friend's Girl is hilarious. But you get into this, and he's playing a straight-laced, serious role, and he does really good in it.
What is it that I can help you with?
I've been watching that couple for months, till I saw you kill them.
He's not standing up next to William Hurt or anything like that, but he does really good in this role of this kind of slimy dude who suddenly wants to imprint himself into the life of this serial killer and wants to walk on the wild side, and he's kind of a douchebag. He plays that character very well, and I think that Dane Cook could have had a pretty good little acting career if he had kind of carried on with more roles like this. Demi Moore, she's always been great. I mean, everybody knows who Demi Moore is. She's had some great roles. She's had some mediocre roles. This, she's a very strong female character, and there's reasons why later on in the film why she kind of divulges to Mr. Brooks why she's always been such a hard ass. But she is a very cool cop character to follow, because obviously you're focused on Mr. Brooks. He's the evil character, but just like Dexter, he's the one you want to win. He's the one that you're intrigued with. He's the one that you want to see survive this situation and come out on top, even though he's killing motherfuckers. But you get Demi Moore, who's absolutely the good guy in this story, and you don't necessarily want her to lose either, because she's such a cool character, she's such a strong character, and she's such a badass that you're like, fuck, can they both win? Can we just have that happen? And driving all of these characters played by these really good actors forward is a very well written script. This is a very smart movie in my opinion, not only with the way that they intertwine all of these different subplots and resolve them in a way that's very satisfying in my opinion, but just the way that they show certain things, like how they show the method to the madness with Mr. Brooks and the way that he kills, like where he has the Ziploc bag over his hand, he zip ties it, or the way that he's got the little magnet to take off the lock and chain and put it back, and all the little interesting details that make serial killers in the real world that much more creative. But just as somebody that doesn't kill people but likes this kind of story, you see it and you're like, that's really clever, that's really cool, that's something new. Oh, he's got this little, oven in his studio, and underneath that is all of his passports, and he dumps all the evidence in the oven every single day. The way that you see the killer's kind of motives and the killer's MO and the way his process is very interesting, and it's very smart, and it's something that I wish we could see more of. Even the action scenes in this movie are great. There's a couple of them in here, mostly regarding Demi Moore and her character and her subplot regarding this hangman killer who's trying to hunt her down. There's some good shootout scenes, there's some good action scenes, there's some tension here and there. It's not a movie that necessarily goes for scares. This is a thriller, but there is some tension-filled scenes where Mr. Brooks is in the shadows and you're not sure what he's gonna do, or Demi Moore where she feels like she's being tailed and you just see a guy running behind her in a hoodie and you're wondering when that string's gonna snap and somebody's gonna start shooting somebody. There's some good boiling tension throughout this film that keeps you intrigued enough to where even if you're not on board for all of the subplots, the ones that you are invested in and are intrigued by and do want to see the resolutions to, they just get tighter throughout the entire runtime to where you're waiting for something unexpected or something crazy to happen out of nowhere, because it feels like it could be around any corner. The movie's got an intriguing little score to it too. Like Mr. Brooks has his own little musical notes that goes through whenever he's doing his little detective work as a killer or whenever he's hunting somebody down. And I honestly think that if this movie had carried through to a successful trilogy, that the score is unique enough and it's cool enough to where this would be one of those scores to genre fans where you could play notes of it and they would go, oh, that's Mr. Brooks' theme. And my final positive, going along with how well the story is interwoven and told and how smart the script is, I also think the movie is very well paced. Like I said, there's enough subplots in here that you could probably fill a season of television with, but they do a good job at wrapping it all up and making the movie have a nice pace to where it feels like it soaks in enough of these storylines long enough where it doesn't feel like it's rushing past shit, but it keeps a well enough quick pace to it to where the tension stays and where you don't feel bored or you don't feel like some of the subplots are starting to drag down the main plot of the film. The movie moves at a nice little clip to where something going on with plot A intervenes with plot C, and then suddenly a twist is brought up in plot B, and then by the time you get to plot D, some shit's already popping off that you weren't expecting in plot A, and the movie just goes. It goes. It's not boring, and it makes it to where you like these characters and you like this storyline and you're intrigued all the way to the end, and at no point do you feel like it's boring or it's trying to do too much or it's overstaying its welcome. Moving on to the negatives, like I said, it works for me, but I can acknowledge if somebody watched this and thought there was too much going on in this film, especially with Demi Moore, who's probably going to be the least intriguing character of the main characters just by default. I mean, you have serial killer, split personalities, and you have cop. I understand that. And the fact that she has 3 different plots going on at once, I could see why somebody would say, I've had enough of her, I just want to talk about Mr. Brooks. But for me, it works. So just know who you are. If you're somebody that doesn't like a bunch of plots and you like stories to be as streamlined as possible, the movie might not be for you. But for me personally, the only true negative to this film is not even really the fault of this film itself in so much as it is the legacy of this film. It's the fact that there are some things regarding the storyline with Jane, the daughter, and with Mr. Brooks and his resolution, his trying to subdue the serial killer personality, and some of the tail threads that are left open with Demi Moore's character, to where I feel like the movie is frustrating to a certain degree when you end it, if you enjoy it, to where you want to have more. You want to have the answers to these questions. You want to see these plot threads developed with a second or a third film. And even though the movie does a good job at resolving pretty much everything in here, and for, since 2007, it's existed perfectly fine as a movie that I really do love and I can enjoy all on its own, as if this is the only thing that's ever gonna happen with Mr. Brooks, because it probably is. But every time I watch it, it just fuels that fire where I'm like, God damn it, give it the money! We need a Mr. Brooks too. But all in all, guys, I think this is a very underrated movie. I think that it's actually one of the more interesting serial killer type thrillers that we have had in quite a long time. I think it's an absolute crime that we're not going to see more of it, but so is the way of the world sometimes in Hollywood. But as itself, as its own singular movie that might not ever get followed up, I think that it's a brilliant script. I think it's got awesome performances, very cool characters, and it handles a lot more story-wise than most movies can.
We are going to have so much fun.
So if you're a fan of thrillers, if you're a fan of serial killer stories, or if you like any of these actors and want to see what they can do with some darker roles, definitely check out Mr. Brooks, because most people that like this genre, I think, will walk away really loving this one. So go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of Mr. Brooks? Are you a fan of this one? Do you find that it's underrated and as underappreciated as I do? Or do you think that it is a gigantic mess and it deserves to stay as one film? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Respectfully, let's talk about Mr. Brooks down below. Check out the social media links. And for now, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.